And Amy?
Good afternoon, everyone. Do you have my slides, Sarah, or? Yep, perfect. Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amy Kinsman. I'm one of the careers advisors here at the University of St Andrews, and I'm delighted to join everybody this afternoon for this event. I know that there's been a lot of hard work went into this across the board, so it's great seeing it actually coming to fruition and to see all of the great guest speakers this afternoon, but also the students in attendance as well. So I don't want to actually take up too much of the time because I think most of the students here will be really interested to hear from the guest speakers, and there's plenty of opportunity to speak with a careers advisor at any point within the Career Centre. But just to sort of give you an idea of some of the things that we do, you might find this quite useful. At the Career Centre, we do believe in supporting students to understand who they are and what makes them curious so that they can find their own unique place in the world. And we do that by educating and inspiring our students so that they can design meaningful and satisfying careers. And our values are to work in partnership with honesty and integrity, and we're impartial and non-judgmental, and we aim to share our expertise for the benefit of all. Now that's our mission, but how does that look in practice? So if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide, thank you. Yeah, sort of on a more practical element, this is a little bit of what we do at the Career Centre. So as you can see from my backdrop behind me and on the screen in front of me, this is the Career Centre. Unfortunately, we've not been in this building for quite some time, but I do really want to reiterate that, you know, that's where we are, and you can access us at the moment online. At the Career Centre, we do provide career information both online and in person through regular updates through social media and email, and we also have a weekly newsletter that comes out as well, where you'll find lots of information about events and opportunities. So I know even this event was advertised in that particular newsletter. We also provide advice and guidance, so with the careers advisors and also CV advisors. We offer 15-minute initial bookable appointments, and then if the student would like to access further support, then they can come for a 45-minute career guidance appointment where we can talk about careers in a bit more depth and explore options and talk about different opportunities, etc. We also offer 45-minute practice interviews as well. So if you have an interview lined up or you're thinking about applying to opportunities, then we offer practice interviews, which can really help build your confidence before going to the actual real life interview. We have a programme of events that take place throughout the year. So like, for example, this event that's on this afternoon, it's just been one example, but this is more a collaborative effort. But we do have events that the Career Centre solely organises, such as career ready sessions, we have festivals, we have career fairs, panel events, and different sort of group sessions as well. So if you are interested in attending more events, then please keep an eye on the Career Centre website and then go into Career Connect for more information. Oh, if you would mind go back, Sarah, it's okay. Yeah, so just keep an eye on that. The other thing I should say is if you are thinking about sort of developing experiences and gaining more opportunities, maybe this afternoon you'll hear some great insights from some of the speakers that it maybe prompt you to go and think about accessing some opportunities, whether that be graduate jobs, internships, placements, volunteering, etc. We do have a platform called Career Connect where you can access lots and lots of opportunities of that nature. So I would make use of the Career Connect platform for that reason. Okay, next slide now. So yes, just to give you a sort of sample of some of the types of events that we have, like I said, we have virtual career fairs that take place. So in the past, we've had the law career fair, we have a main career fair that takes place each year, and we have a science and technology fair as well. Events, as I said, they can be employer and alumni presentations, and we have themed weeks in both semesters as well, and we have our career ready sessions, which take place usually over lunchtime and have different themes surrounding CVs, LinkedIn, applications and skills, that sort of thing. Work experience and skill development opportunities also take place. So for example, we have opportunities on campus to do internships, but we also have insight days that we organise with local businesses and industries as well, where you can actually go into a business or a company for a day and do essentially shadow what that company does, which runs alongside our work shadowing programme as well. So there's lots of ways in which you can access opportunities from the Career Centre. So I would really hope that you would make as much use of that as possible. Next slide, please. So if you are now sitting thinking, okay, this all sounds really interesting, where can I start with that? I would say that the Career Centre website is a really good starting point. Where you can book the appointments on there, you can find out more information about the events, and also just find really great careers information and exploring career options on there as well. So yes, make sure that you make use of the Career Centre website. At the moment it's going through redevelopment, which is great. So maybe in the next couple of months you'll see an even more shinier version of what we currently have, which we're looking forward to. Okay, next slide please. So I did mention the Career Connect platform. So Career Connect is where it's all happening in terms of the appointments that you can book with a CV advisor and a careers advisor, but it's also where all of the opportunities are advertised. So for example, if you are thinking about applying to an internship or an event, they'll be on Career Connect. And same with the events that we have to offer as well. So if you are thinking about taking action and trying to maybe think forward with your career, then I would recommend going on to the Career Connect platform for that. Okay. Just to add another sort of element into it, we also have a Saint Connect platform as well. Saint Connect is a little bit different in nature, but it's very useful nonetheless. Today you might take some inspiration from some of the talks surrounding networking and talking to businesses and industry. Unfortunately, on Saint Connect, you can actually connect with previous alumni who are looking to support you as students and graduates, and potentially there could be some mentoring relationships develop on Saint Connect, and they're sort of really keen to help and support students and graduates. There's sometimes maybe some events similar to this take place on there, and also there's some mentoring opportunities as well. So if you do get the opportunity to, make use of Saint Connect as well. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, we have a weekly newsletter that goes out every week, so you can access that on the Career Centre website. So again, I would recommend making use of that and keeping an eye out for opportunities that are coming up. You just never know. It could be your dream job opportunity, or it could be an event that you've been looking to attend, etc. It's a variety of things. And also as careers advisors, we submit articles into that newsletter every single week. So there's always some careers advice on the newsletter as well. Slide, please. So with all of that in mind, I feel like that's been a little bit of a whistle-stop tour of the whole Career Centre and everything that we do. And like I say, there is quite a lot of things in which we do, but I realise it's quite overwhelming to sort of throw all of that all at you in quite a short period of time. But my main rationale behind that is that I don't want to take up too much of this event, because I know there's some really great speakers here this afternoon. But my main message is, please make use of the Career Centre and what we have to offer. Don't feel that there's any reason why you can't access us or whatever. We're all super friendly. We're all here to help. So if you're just thinking about starting something, or you're not sure where to start with careers, then just come along, book an appointment online, and we'll sort of see where we can support you. So with that in mind, I'm going to cut out at this point and let the take over the speakers from this point, and we'll hear from our speakers. Thank you.
Yep, so our first speaker is Anna Rauter. She is a PhD researcher here at St Andrews. And Anna, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Sarah, and thank you so much for inviting me to speak at this event. And I'm so glad to be part of this and see people interested in a career in sustainability. Yeah, I'm Anna Rauter. I'm a PhD researcher at the Center for Energy Ethics, which is based at the university here in St Andrews. I'm in my final year of my PhD, and I will tell you more about my current position, but I'd like to first tell you a bit more about how I got here to what I'm currently doing, And that's your cue, Sarah. Could you please move to the next slide? Okay, so when I finished high school, my dream job was a career in politics where I had studied economics and some sort of climate science or science. I wanted to be a politician who knew both about economics and business, but also about science. And then I realized that was a really difficult joint degree to do. But at St Andrews, I had the possibility of doing 2 degrees, and what I actually ended up graduating in when I did my undergraduate degree was international relations and social anthropology. And during my time as an undergraduate at St Andrews, I actually had the chance to do some volunteering in Mongolia. I taught conversational English to various people throughout the country, and that opportunity actually brought me to Mongolia on 3 different trips. And at one point, I was invited to continue teaching at a different location, which was a mine, a wolfram mine or tungsten mine, which is a metal, in the middle of nowhere on the west side of Mongolia, to teach English conversational courses to engineers who were working at that mine. And during this day, it was almost 2 months, I met the owners of that particular mine, and we became quite friendly. We got acquainted, and they introduced me to the rest of their family. And it turned out that they were one of the wealthiest families in the country, and they owned several different mines, including coal mines and gold mines, as far as I know. They were quite, they had strategic positions. So one of the brothers that I got to meet, he was in politics. Another one was a sort of spiritual leader. And I thought, wow, this is very different image to what I previously had about Mongolia, because Mongolia is one of the poorest countries in the world. But yet here I was meeting all these very privileged and very sort of senior people leading companies and leading politics. And that inspired me to do my dissertation. So my dissertation in anthropology was on business elites in Mongolia. And in that process, I met Dr. Meta Hai, who's actually also my current dissertation supervisor, PhD supervisor, and I think she's amongst the audience as well. She is also the director for the Center of Energy Ethics here at St Andrews. And we shared an interest in Mongolia. She had been doing her research on Mongolian gold mining. And I wanted to continue and pursue my research on Mongolia as a PhD. And I applied to both Cambridge and St Andrews for the PhD position. And I got in, but I didn't get sufficient funding. And for me, that was really key. I wanted to do the PhD by being fully funded, not only because I wanted to be, financially independent, but also because I was told by various people in academia how important it is to get your own funding from a recognized funding body for your research. It shows, on the one hand, that the funder values your idea. They think it's an innovative project that has potential, and as such, it gives you credibility in the academic community. And so for me, I thought, okay, I didn't get sufficient funding this time around, so I'll wait another year, and then I'll reapply. And in that other year, I actually got the opportunity to work for the Liechtenstein Embassy in Vienna, which is also the embassy to the UN there and the OSCE. So that was a really interesting year. I learned many things, and I had lots of career experiences and skills that helped me until today. I also got to do some policy work on sustainability and the environment. And it was a direction that I was really interested in exploring. Diplomacy was always something that was sort of on my mind of things to do. But I still had the PhD at the back of my mind, and I reapplied for continuing my research on Mongolia. Again, I got accepted. But at the same time, Dr. Meta Hai encouraged me to apply for one of her positions because she got a big grant from the European Research Council and was able to employ 2 PhD students. And so she encouraged me to apply for one of those positions. And I got that, and actually decided that I would prefer to do this project because it was about something new. It wasn't on Mongolia, it was on Norway, as you can see here on the slide. But I was really excited about this opportunity. And so what I proposed as my PhD project was to look at energy elites. And with energy elites, I mean, I specifically mean people who are in leadership positions and also expert positions in the energy industry. So they occupy, you know, the CEOs, the managers, the executives, working in energy businesses in Norway. And my central question in my PhD is, how do these people envision the future of energy, and how do they work towards that future? How do they shape the energy future in Norway? And so for this, in terms of my PhD and the way it looked like as a social anthropologist doing research as a PhD student, I spent 18 months in Oslo and conducting fieldwork, including interviews, and I sort of was based at several companies, energy companies. And now I'm in my final year writing up my thesis. But I want to tell you a little bit about what it is like to be a PhD student and what it is like in that sort of early step of an early career academic. Because it may sound to you that doing a PhD is a very solitary experience. You're just sort of sitting in the library or at home reading books and writing this thesis. And that is part of it. Part of it is doing research, writing, consulting the literature, thinking about analyzing. But I think a PhD can be and is many times much more than that. I'm very lucky. I'm part of a great research team, and we do a lot of different projects together that are interdisciplinary. And so, for example, I've listed two of the events here. Last year we did the Energy Ethics 2020, which was a 5-day online conference where we brought academics, scientists, and people from the industry, energy industry, together to speak about energy and to speak about the future of energy. And then recently we did the Art of Energy, where we brought together artists and academics and people interested in energy. And again, we looked at visions of energy, contemporary ways of visualizing energy, which is very fruitful. And it's not the sort of, you know, image that you would get of an armchair academic. I'm also a regular contributor to the energy blog, which I initiated, which is part of our website, and we publish thought pieces there. And I'm just admitting someone who's come in, who's in the way of the slide. Oh, not working. Yeah, so do check it out. Do check out the Center for Energy Ethics Research website if you're interested in a career in academia or in doing a PhD. And please know that it's not just, one part of it is doing the research, but it's really up to you to design how you want your PhD phase to be like. And you can be very interdisciplinary and innovative, and you can have several ways of reaching out to people through your research. Yeah, I'm happy to answer any sort of questions about the process of a PhD. Oh yeah, the one other thing I wanted to say is also, just because you're doing a PhD doesn't mean that you'll automatically have to end up in academia. There's many different paths that are open to you after you've done a PhD. And I think it's a very desirable, you know, my dad always said, oh, you're going to do 4 years of this focused niche study. What do you have to show after that? But I think you have a lot of things to show after that. You show that you can work committedly for 4 years on a topic. You can do research. If you organize projects and do other small opportunities on the side, you show that you can work in a team, that you can be part of public engagement, public speaking. So it's very versatile, and it's very much up to you on how you want to design the way your PhD looks like. So I encourage you, if you're thinking about it, to plunge into it and get to writing applications. Next slide, please, Sarah. So now some pieces of advice. I think something that's really important to me when I think back of what I wished other people would have told me is really do what interests you. And I think if sustainability and if matters of climate and energy and you know, if that interests you, then pursue it. Don't do what others tell you you should do. I remember when I was doing, as an undergraduate, when I was told my father that I would do volunteering in Mongolia, he was a bit disappointed because he thought it would be better for my career if I would have done an internship in a company. But as you can see, I think from my career path up until this point, this volunteering experience in Mongolia was absolutely crucial and brought me to where I am today. So please don't be discouraged by others and what they think is best for you. Do what once you establish an interest in something, it's really worth pursuing. Relatedly, I think you should take up any opportunity. There's so many things that will come your way, things that you might see on LinkedIn, or a friend that tells you about a new opportunity there, or something you read on the news. And I really encourage you to apply everywhere. And I also encourage you not to be discouraged if you don't get something right away. That's part of it. And it happens to all of us. And it's difficult not to be discouraged. It still happens to me when I really want something and I don't get it in terms of my career. But you can learn from that, and you can think about, also feel free to ask people, well, why didn't I get this opportunity? Could you give me some constructive criticism so I can use it for the next thing? And, learn from that experience and build on it so that I can make future applications and pursuing future opportunities better. And lastly, I want to emphasize the importance of networking. And I think you can do that nowadays through multiple ways, through all the social media platforms and especially LinkedIn, but even your personal social media. People look at it, and it's a great way, especially if you're interested in important topics like sustainability. Make sure that your social media reflects that. And when you speak to people at events like these or other career-related events, or even in private, make sure you tell people what you're interested in and what you like to do. You never know who has some sort of connection for you. And then also, it's important to learn how to sell yourself and your skills. And I know that sounds a bit harsh, but ultimately, you sort of have to learn how to market yourself, because other people need to know what you can do. And you don't have to be arrogant about it, but just be confident about what it is you can do and what you think you can contribute. So that's it from me. I'm looking forward to any questions you might have about doing a PhD or any of the other things I've discussed. And thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Anna. And yeah, just to reiterate, if anyone has questions throughout the event, you could just pop them in the chat and we'll get to them at the end. And for our next speaker, we're going to do a little bit of a switch in the lineup. So actually, Doug Sims is going to go next, and Stacy Hope will be the last speaker. So I will just skip through these slides a little bit. And here we go. Doug, the floor is yours.
Great. Hi, everyone. Let me get to the right slide. Sorry. Hi, my name is Doug Sims. I live in New York. Right now I'm in Brooklyn. I currently am at an organization called Natural Resources Defense Council. It's a international environmentally focused nonprofit that was founded in 1970, really at the time when sort of pollution was becoming a major issue, a major public issue in the United States, to the extent that there was a lot of open dumping into fresh water and air pollution, and realization of the environmental harms that were being inflicted upon human health. And NRDC was really formed, inspired by actually some of the civil rights organizations that had arisen in the 1940s and 50s to have public interest litigation for civil rights. Notably, the something called the NAACP, which was founded in the 20s, actually, was the law firm which brought a lot of the important segregation cases in the US. And so some lawyers in New York really wanted to create a law firm for the environment. And so they founded this law firm, and they got some young lawyers to staff it. And they were really a part of the first really concentrated environmental legal strategies in the US. And succeeded in really helping to pass some of the landmark legislation to protect the environment in those days, the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, et cetera. So since that time, NRDC has grown to be about 800 people around the world. We have offices all over the US. as well as India and China. And we're not just lawyers. We're scientists. We're various kinds of policy experts, a lot of energy experts, a lot of water, air experts, agriculture and food. We have still have litigators, but we also have a massive communications team, because really communications is how you get people to understand your issues, and ultimately you want people to participate in the political system and vote and really elect candidates that align with sustainability and environmental causes. So that's sort of the background about NRDC. I can say more about that. So my own journey began probably, I guess I'll trace my interest in sustainability to my interest in philosophy. Actually, I went to Stanford University in California, where I started out studying international relations and political science, and kind of realized that I wanted to study something that was actually more fundamental. So I studied some classics in philosophy, and I gravitated towards Chinese philosophy, Taoism, Greek philosophy, and then 19th and 20th century philosophy. So I got my degree in philosophy, and during that time, when I looked at sort of natural law and these concepts, which were really animating some of the thought that I found the most attractive, I started to think about harmony in the natural world and how we can be aligned with it. And so that was sort of in the back of my mind, even though I wasn't really in a sustainability field. My third year, I ended up spending a year in Paris at the Sorbonne, where I studied, again, philosophy, mostly philosophy of art and some sociology, and really kind of fell in love with living in France. So when I came back to finish my fourth year at university, my thinking at that point was I probably would go get a PhD, probably in philosophy, but I didn't want to do it right away, and I wanted to go back and live in Europe. So I ended up going down to my career office at Stanford in those days, and figuring out an opportunity where I can go and I could study in a program in the south of France, where I could get credit towards my language requirements for my eventual PhD. So I ended up moving to France, the south of France, in Montpellier. It's in southwestern France, and kind of not coming back for a while. Kind of got a bit sidetracked and taught English at a place called the French American Center. And I'm interested in film, and I've been interested in writing and journalism. So I started writing journalism when I was there freelance. I also got involved with some filmmakers there, and ended up working on a film festival in Avignon. And then through that film work, ended up getting an offer to come back to work in the States, work in some film projects, and really kind of lost the PhD path altogether, and ended up working in film for a while, and then working at the in for the United Nations for a year, working for the Canadian ambassador, learning about diplomacy, and at that point thinking about maybe joining the Foreign Service. So I kind of had a wandering path. Ultimately, I decided that I wanted to get another degree, but I wanted a degree that was more of a professional degree, and that allowed me flexibility. So like many people, I decided to go to law school. Part of that decision was really honestly driven because I actually had debt from, this is an American conundrum, a debt from undergrad that I still had, and actually I wasn't making much headway in paying it. And so ironically, the incentives were for me to go to law school so I could earn a lot of money and then pay back both the law debt and the debt from undergrad. So I was fortunate enough to get into several good law schools, and I ended up going to Harvard Law School, where I could have immediately recognized that I wanted to work internationally and wanted to work in sort of sustainable development. And there's not that many options to do that and make sufficient money to pay your bills. So I recognized that I could work for an international law firm and work on infrastructure projects in emerging markets, and do something which I found I was passionate about, and also make money at a law firm that would allow me to sort of pay my debts and have a decent lifestyle. So I ended up working for a British law firm called Allen & Overy, which you may have heard of if you're in Scotland, for about 10 years. And that was really an amazing experience. I got to work in several countries. I got to work in, all over Africa and Latin America. I got to work in both French-speaking Africa and English-speaking Africa, and I got to learn Spanish. They paid for it, and I learned a lot about, politics and also business, and just really the whole gamut of how you could develop countries to be have a standard of living which was higher than they were currently experiencing. And so a lot of the messiness of corruption and other aspects which are present everywhere, but particularly in places where there's a lot of poverty and discrimination. So by doing that work, working on large projects like power plants, like shipping facilities, like airports, industrial facilities, I was representing countries and also representing investors in these projects and lenders in these projects, and I got to see how they were very damaging to the environment, even though a lot of them had goals that were laudable from the perspective of trying to improve living standards. They had incredible impacts on the environment and also on communities that were in their footprint. So I also because you're at a law firm, you can't choose what you work on. So I worked on also whatever came in the door, and some of that was oil and gas. And over this is going in the early 2000s, and climate change was not such a big issue at that point, but I became more and more aware of it and sensitive to it, and sort of didn't want to have to work in those areas again. But I had a lot of skills, and I wanted to maybe work in renewable energy, but at that point there wasn't very much renewable energy in the market. So I ended up taking a sabbatical from my law firm, and then traveling. My wife is a filmmaker. In the end, I got my other one foot in the film world. My wife is a filmmaker. Traveled with her to Peru and worked on one of her films. And in that period, I just kind of realized I didn't want to work really in a way that was compromised. And so I kind of made my decision to move away from the law firm, move into either a solar company or something like that, and I ended up meeting somebody from the NRDC sort of randomly. And they said, look, you can come and you can work on the same issues, but more from the side of advocacy, where you can really be working towards the world that you want to create, not the world as it is. And so I thought that was an attractive proposition and came into NRDC in 2010 to work on sort of sustainable infrastructure and issues that I really was becoming passionate about, and was really amazed by the people that were in sort of the nonprofit world. I hadn't known any of them really at that point, and I was sort of a bit of a square peg in a round hole, being from the private sector and being from a commercial background. So it wasn't the easiest transition, but it was very rewarding. So in my current role, I run something called the Green Finance Center, and essentially we focus on trying to transform the financial system to be more sustainable. And we work on we're kind of like a think tank, but also we do advocacy and work on legislation. We try to create a community of practice of like-minded practitioners, and some of the things that we work on, for example, are something called green banks, which are essentially public financial institutions that are created to help countries drive investment to the Paris Agreement compliant areas like renewable energy, but also resilient infrastructure and natural infrastructure, like helping for example replant mangroves in places as a natural shield to extreme weather, working with how to work with farmers to finance more resilient agriculture. So it's this broad range of activities, and these green banks are really there to bridge between where we are now and where we're going. So they're public institutions. The UK had one of the first ones, which try to take extra risks and work with the private sector to accelerate their progress in changing how they do business. And so we work on projects that relate to that space. Same thing is true. We work with something called green bonds, which are another way of doing the same thing with another instrument. There's a lot of acronyms everywhere, but if you're interested in this area of sustainability on the business side, an important concept to understand is called ESG, environmental, social, and governance. And it's really the idea that traditional business which just looks at, financial metrics and economic returns, really need to be expanded to focus on environmental impacts and also environmental benefits, social impacts and benefits, and also how things are run. That's the governance piece. Is there transparency? Is there corruption? Is there equity and treatment of women and minorities and transgendered people? And how are you treating your workers? All these issues are not only important in and of themselves, but actually relevant to successful investments. And so that field is very broad, and I think you're seeing a lot of companies really trying to understand it, catch up, and implement measures which allow them to transform themselves. Some of it's greenwashing or inauthentic, but some of it is real. And so what groups like NRDC and others try to do is hold people's feet to the fire, but also work in collaboration to help these transformations be science-based, verified and authentic. Another aspect of the work, just to mention, is climate change in particular poses risks to the financial system, and those risks aren't really recognized or understood right now by financial markets. So you can imagine that if a series of climate change driven events, which are happening more and more frequently, aren't properly understood, you could see a financial collapse of the kind we saw, for example, in 2008. And so part of our work is to work with regulators to help them understand climate risk and have that baked into the financial system so that it's less vulnerable to these kinds of climate change, what we can see coming down the pike and what's happening right now. So I'm going to just move into, I don't know, I think that's, how much more time do I have? Should I try to move to the advice part, Sarah, or?
Yeah,
Okay,
2 minutes about.
Okay, good. So advice, I would say that people say do lists of 3, I'll do a list of 5 things. But my first advice, and what I'd give to myself or to you where you are in your career, is it's really important to have a daily practice where you make time for yourself in the morning or night, whatever you feel. If you're a morning person, do it in the morning. If not, do it at night. But where you kind of step back from what you're doing and just check in with yourself and say, am I nervous? Am I tired? Am I stressed out? What am I worried about? Just take a moment. I find I was not an early morning person until probably 10 years ago, but I find it's if I can get up in the morning and do it, it's like the time when I know that nothing else is happening. It's quiet, and just do it, even if it's 10 minutes. And if you can do yoga or meditate or whatever you want to do, go for a run, move your body if you can, especially now in the time of COVID. But having that every day or every other day is really important to keep yourself sort of on track, I find. Second thing I would say is keep learning all the time. I've found that I like to study languages. I speak a couple of them, and I try to keep those improved. Just keep yourself something else for yourself that you're doing, which also makes yourself more marketable. Helps your brain work differently. Doesn't have to be language. Could be whatever. It could be music. Could be whatever, physics, whatever you want to do. I also would recommend, maybe not now that you're in school, but at a certain point, the thing that you enjoyed the least but wanted to understand, try to learn about that in a time when you don't have to learn about it, because whatever was blocking you on that topic, there's probably something great about it which you could discover if you weren't forced to study it in school. Third thing is monitor your progress towards your goals, but don't panic if it's slow, because things take time. And you don't have to be the person who's rewarded at 24 or something to have a great successful life. Do what you love, take your time. Good stuff can take time. Repetition can be key to achieving your goals. And then the last sort of 2 pieces are don't overthink everything. Just get out of your head. Try to sometimes just it's so easy to get caught up in different ways to measure yourself against where you are, your peers, what your parents wanted, what your significant other wants. Just don't overthink it. Try to be where you are now and enjoy what you're doing. And then the last thing I would just say is kind of tying it all together. Be firm, but be flexible. What do I mean by that? You should be really firm about trying to achieve your goals and your vision, and don't let people dissuade you, and don't be too hard on yourself. But also be flexible, because it's never going to go how you think it's going to go. You have to you have to sort of like go around the rocks like you're water in a river, and not just go straight down the alley when there's curves in it. So it's kind of high level philosophical, but I think those things have served me well, and look forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much. That was great. So we're going to take about a 10-minute break, and if we can all just regroup to be back around 5 p.m. London time, and then we'll get started again. All right, is everyone back? Stacy, are you there?
Hi. Hi, Sarah. Hi, everyone.
Yeah, I'm going to give Stacy the floor now.
Wonderful. Well, first of all, thank you for being so accommodating. And you might see why, because I have a 5-year-old running in and out, asking for snacks. So when I'm not juggling a 5-year-old, I am using my degree in social anthropology, my PhD in social anthropology, in various ways. And maybe to start off by giving a bit of context as to who I am and how I've ended up doing what I do. So I'm from Guyana. I'm from a developing country, and I think by virtue of being from a developing country, sustainability and development is a natural issue to be engaged with or to be concerned by. So I grew up wanting to become Indiana Jones and a diplomat. So somewhere between there, I landed on being an anthropologist. And my great aunt will say, when she came to visit me in Guyana at 9, I said I wanted to be an anthropologist. I didn't know what it was, but I knew that it would shape my life eventually. And I guess I stuck to my guns. So I moved from Guyana to do my undergraduate in the US, in Maryland, a small sailing university. So if you sail, and you might know a bit more about that. But I did my undergraduate in philosophy and ancient studies and cultural anthropology, and focused mostly on the bridge between anthropology and the classics. So I actually wasn't looking at the field that I worked in until I moved to St Andrews, where I started a master's, and that master's actually led to my PhD in indigeneity within the Guyana-Brazil context. So I lived on the border between Guyana and Brazil, thinking that I was going to be Indiana Jones and discover new cultures and really develop a clear understanding as to how governments and communities could work together. And I somehow ended up working with mining communities that lived around the community that I worked and lived in. And so I had quite a lot of engagement with mining communities, but still it didn't click that I would end up working with miners in the future. So I moved back to Edinburgh. I lived in Edinburgh and commuted to St Andrews, finished my PhD, and then moved to London to start a fellowship. But I was an international student. I was partially funded. I had partial funding for my PhD. But I still persevered. And I thought, okay, I need to make money before I start this fellowship. So I need to make money in order to earn money was the conundrum. So I decided to take a temp role whilst until my fellowship started. I think it's going to start in like 3 months. And one of the temp jobs was in a mining company. So it was a startup junior mining company in London. It was just the CEO and myself and the board of directors, and they were looking at assets in Chile. And I thought, well, God, I'm working for a mining company, and I just finished working with indigenous communities who have suffered at the hands of mining companies. What the hell am I doing? So I actually called one of my supervisors, Hewan, and practically said, I can't believe I'm working for a mining company. What on earth should I do? And Hewan's response was great. He says, no, it's perfect that we have an anthropologist working in mining. We need more anthropologists working in industries where they go in blind to the needs of communities and where understanding how to engage with these different communities becomes lost because it's looked at from a corporate perspective and not from a wider perspective of how to engage and what that conversation with various cultures and communities should look like. So after he said that, I was like, okay, yes, how can I position myself more effectively? So instead of 2 days of working in this mining company, as I was supposed to, I ended up working there for a year. And during that time, I was invited to join a Women in Mining Association, a group of, and it was very small at the time, this was 2010. So there were probably about maximum 40 women a part of this association. Today, we have, I think, about 8,000 members. But at the time, there were about 40 of us just discussing some of the issues around women within the sector. And what was evident was the connection between gender inclusivity and changes within the mining sector related to environment. So a lot of the issues for women dealt around water management and safe water usage, because women in the communities are the bearers of burden when it comes to distribution of work. And when you can't find safe water, you have to travel further afield. So quite a lot of sustainability themes came out of these discussions with women, amongst women. And, some people would say these are like the soft issues, but perhaps, something more like the power issues, the issues that can turn the tides. So I started having more conversations around this, and then an opportunity arose for me to travel to Kenya. So I just moved to Kenya. I, by the way, noticed that I didn't mention anything else about this fellowship that I was supposed to do. I kind of abandoned that idea, mainly because I always wanted to be active in the field. And from a young age, I always wanted to be involved in development and shaping policies and shaping the ways in which countries can function in a way that works for their people, but also works for the economy. So I then just abandoned the academia side, not from the angle where I don't engage in academia at all, I still do, but where I thought, okay, I'm not going to be a professor of anthropology. I'll use my anthropological understandings in a way that works for the people on the ground. So I moved to Kenya and ended up working for a telecommunications company, consulting. So I decided, okay, I can't really hold a permanent job because I don't have the right visa. And as an international student, understanding your visa requirements is something that you should become quite au fait with. But I moved to Kenya and ended up consulting for the Kenya Red Cross, for Safaricom, which is their major telecommunications company, and for other NGOs and organizations around how do we strengthen our ability to operate in these developing and emerging market contexts. So I'm in Kenya, I'm working on these projects, and it's now exciting me, and I'm working on it on my own terms. So now the concept of becoming an independent consultant has kind of settled, because the great thing about social anthropology is that there is the underlying, I guess, framework to shift into so many different fields, so many different sectors as well. So I then decided, okay, well, what next? I moved back to London after my visa was up, and I couldn't extend it anymore, but it was time to come back, and was invited to bid on a project for the UN in Guyana. So I bid on that, and actually, sorry, not in Guyana, in Suriname. And it was a project around biodiversity and gender. But if anyone's familiar with Suriname, is that it's a major mining jurisdiction, and working with indigenous communities and Maroons, so descendants of runaway slaves, you will be heavily immersed in the mining sector. So now, once again, I'm back in mining, and I'm working on a sustainability issue. I'm working on a biodiversity conservation project, which would help shape the Surinamese government's agenda on how to deal with biodiversity conservation on the one hand, but then also how to engage the major mining entity within the constructs of sustainability and biodiversity. So this first UN contract then became the catalyst for others. And it then became the catalyst for engaging in issues around mining, biodiversity conservation, but then also going back to my roots, within anthropology, working with indigenous communities and the issues surrounding those communities, such as land rights and land titling. So I was then asked to work with the indigenous communities across Guyana, and there are 9 distinct groups recognized by the state, and working with all of them on a land rights policy. So this goes back to governments thinking that all indigenous communities will think alike and are the same. So having to negotiate and really get down to what it means to come up with sustainable and relatable policies when you have various stakeholders with varying needs and agendas, and political agendas as well. So so my UN and government work then started to shift really into policy development and working with governments and the multilaterals on how to shape these agendas. Now, fast forward a bit, and I'm still working for the multilaterals, but now I'm working for the World Bank and the European Commission. And these projects have now looked towards, on the one hand, public-private partnerships. So now I'm more engaged in the private sector, looking quite a lot with large infrastructure companies and energy, so hydro projects and mining companies, and how to strengthen the government's capacity to negotiate, but then also how to strengthen the private sector's ability to engage in a constructive way. And I think after working within these constructs, it then made sense that my career was no longer just either an Indiana Jones trajectory or a diplomat trajectory, although my retirement plan is that I will be a diplomat. So if everyone could just snap your fingers and put it out into the universe, eventually I'll do my foreign service and get onto that trajectory. But for now, the immediate need is the engagement on the ground. So I am still an independent or international development consultant, but I realized that there were other needs as well. So I consult for the UN, and I'm currently consulting for UNICEF on their largest So the UN group, they have one of the largest data sets that comes out of UNICEF. And I am one of the report writers for one of the countries. But then my work as an anthropologist, obviously I work with women, obviously I work with vulnerable communities, and obviously I work in various sectors that relate to the communities in which I work. So that has afforded me, working within the agricultural sector, working within mining in particular. I've tried to avoid oil and gas, but by virtue of what's happening in Guyana, I cannot escape that. But so working in these various areas, I've now had to pivot somewhat to the commercial side. So I still hold my hat as an international development consultant, but in recent times, I've had to engage from an ESG lens, an environmental social governance lens, and I kind of caught in and out, Doug mentioning this a bit. And maybe you've done all the work for me, Doug, so I don't have to explain what it is. But as companies are now being tasked to answer to the growing concerns of climate change, community discord, and maintaining integrity from within the companies, ESG has now become the focal point, and that's driven by the fact that the pandemic has pushed us into the confines of our homes and the space in which we work and live, and a lot more scrutiny in the way in which we do work has come to the fore, causing so many of us to really hone in on what it is we need to hold companies a task for. So after much debate, I have been asked to join Africa Matters, which is an Africa-focused consultancy firm specializing traditionally in strategic and strategy and risk management. So they do a lot of work around due diligence, market entry, non-litigious dispute resolutions, and their clients have all been commercial. They don't serve governments, but because companies now have to answer to an ESG, to ESG regulators, whether it's from the environmental side, whether it's conflict. So the European Union has recently released their regulations on conflict minerals. The UK government with PACT, they've released one on modern slavery. So because of all of these regulations, companies are trying to get their heads around. You have people like myself with an anthropological background that can answer to maybe the S and the G, but by virtue of my work in climate change, I also can answer to the E with biodiversity as well. So if we can move to the next slide, please, Sarah.
And I'm just conscious of time, if you could.
Yes, so this is,
thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. So so for me, oh, I can hear my.
It's question time.
Is it? She told me 5:45.
I think someone's unmuted, Julia. You can mute yourself. Thank you.
Lovely. So because of time, I put reflections instead of advice. It's up to you whether it's advice. And the first thing I wrote was perfection is not enlightenment. I thought that, okay, this is how exactly I wanted to shape my career, but allowing life to shape it for you is definitely a good lesson to learn. I think Doug mentioned about, constantly learn and take in, especially if it's something that you're interested in. Just be a lifetime learner. Find a mentor or a sounding board. I have many of those. And that really helps to guide me as to where my next moves are. Join a network, an association, because lots of opportunities come through your networks and associations, and it gives you a good community to sound ideas off of. And don't try to fit every mold. Stay true to yourself, and you will find your way. And thank you, Sarah. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much. We'll just move on to Dr. Gemma John. Yeah, you have the floor.
Brilliant. Hopefully you can hear me. Yeah, brilliant. Okay. So thanks Stacy and Doug and Anna. Some really great. I'm completely mesmerised. Hopefully everyone else is. I'm really pulled into some of the detail that we're kind of sharing here. So currently I'm founder and director at Human City, which is my own little startup, which I'll talk about a little later, and also honorary research fellow at University College London. And the reason why I put these two down is really just to, I guess, set the scene, which is I try and balance applied and academic research. And that's something I think I've been quite passionate about all the way through what I've been doing. And I'll go into the reasons for that, but I would say I kind of try and bridge the kind of gap between academic academia and research, applied research. Quite often those two find it difficult to meet. Next slide. Okay, so going back, well back to, I guess, my school days, is that I was quite good at, I was a bit of a generalist, so I was very good at art, very artistic, it was not too bad at science, and enjoyed the humanities. And so I had, a bit of a struggle in my own mind as to what to do with that kind of that generalist background. But I always, what the connection was between those different areas of interest was a fascination with humans and what it was to be human. And so that drew me into an undergraduate degree in social anthropology at Edinburgh, and studied for 3 years. And my final year I did a dissertation, and in Edinburgh and possibly other Scottish universities, there was a huge emphasis on that dissertation, and that was really fieldwork based. We did some research, and then the idea was to write up that research as you would as an anthropologist. In the real world, and I focused on knowledge sharing practices in an accountancy firm. I was just totally fascinated by how people shared knowledge and the structures in place for sharing knowledge. And actually, my anthropology learnings had taught me that knowledge was not some object that you could just kind of neatly transfer. Actually, it was much more complicated than that. So that led to a thesis in what is knowledge, thinking about the history of science and philosophy of science and knowledge itself. And led to MRes at St Andrews, research methods degree, which St Andrews offers as a precursor to a PhD. I did a PhD in, I guess, the anthropology of knowledge, or sociology of knowledge, and really focusing on a piece of legislation that had been introduced at the time called the Freedom of Information Act, introduced in 2005, and most universities and local government workers will be very familiar with this piece of legislation. It was a bit of a pain at the time it was introduced, 2005, but I think people have got used to it now. But it put an obligation on civil servants to disclose information to citizens, to members of the public who requested that information. And so I spent a long time sitting alongside civil servants in Scotland, and my field research was very much based in Scotland, really understanding what information was released and the basis on which was released, and then what citizens got from the disclosure of that information, what knowledge they obtained from the information that was shared with them. And so that deepened my engagement and my interest in anthropology, and also allowed for a kind of deep focus with the question of what is knowledge, but also focus on bureaucracy and really local government and the transformations in local government at the time, and more broadly an interest in legal and political anthropology, which is a broader discussion in the field of anthropology. I then decided to continue with anthropology and took up a postdoctoral research position at Edinburgh in a research institute focusing on really the impacts of the Enlightenment, very broad topic, but I was there for 6 months. And then eventually took up a post at Manchester as a lecturer of undergraduate anthropology, first year undergraduate anthropology, joining a research centre which was called the Centre for Research on Social Cultural Change. So, really looking at social change in its broader sense, and it's an interdisciplinary centre. It was sociologists, anthropologists, philosophers, business management professional people, you name it. People were, the department was there involved in these conversations, focusing on aspects of social change across 5 themes. The theme I was part of was focusing on infrastructure, so infrastructural change, and the group, the thread, and my colleagues were looking at infrastructural projects around the world, engineering projects, big city developments, and thinking about the social aspect of those developments, and actually how does the technical, social, and material kind of come together as one, and the politics of those developments. And what was interesting for me, it was a very policy-focused institute. So it was a moment when research was really applied to practical problems. So there were many policy research papers written by the members of the centre, and so forth. So that was a moment in my career when I thought, actually, as an academic, I can really be outward-looking. And take some of the theoretical knowledge that I was deepening and strengthening, and really apply it to practical policy questions. And with that in mind, I jumped ship and moved into industry. And so for me, that was a really important move, because having explored some of these issues theoretically and really kind of got into the depths of some theoretical challenges, I really wanted to know what it was like to be an anthropologist in practice, actually working on infrastructure projects. So I worked as a consultant at ACOM, which is an international planning, engineering and architecture practice. Something like 100,000 employees. It's almost the size of a small country. It's got offices around the world. I mostly was in research in that practice, specifically focusing on workplace change. So there's a lot of discussion around, the future of work, and again, it will be a conversation that will come around as a result of COVID. And then moved into architecture, so moved to Foster & Partners, which is an architecture practice in London, as a senior researcher, and my field of research broadened out to more than just workplace, thinking about residential living and accommodation, retail, various different buildings and various different places, and what kind of new ideas we could bring to the design of those places, from the perspective of what it is to be human, and from the perspective of understanding the social change and the dynamics of change that will be brought about over time. I then set up, I made the leap beyond, out of a kind of secure, paid 9-to-5 role, and set up my own consultancy called Human City. And like Stacy and I actually were peers at St Andrews University, both did PhDs together. But like Stacy, I really wanted to explore what it was to be an anthropologist in the built environment, working on building projects on my own terms. So actually, what could I bring really as someone who was focused on social cultural change and what it was to be human to building and development projects, and ended up focusing on issues of sustainability. So actually, this is the point where I really pivoted towards sustainability, and there's a bit of a loop to explore briefly, which is in the context in which I was working and I'm working now. Local government had introduced a piece of legislation called the Public Services Social Value Act, and that put an emphasis on developers demonstrating the benefit of the developments that we're bringing forward to communities. So rather than just thinking about financial profit, there was an emphasis on thinking about community benefit and what's called social value in the context of new developments. So I've ended up working as a Human City with property developers, but actually also asset management teams. So that's companies that invest money in property and acquire that property, buy the property, to run it and manage it in a way that obviously it brings profit to the business. But my role is very much to illuminate the social needs in a particular local context and the community benefit and in the quote social value that needs to be delivered in the context of that building and development. That can get very technical, so it can get very technical into ESG. We've heard ESG before. Social value is another version of ESG. It has an increasingly well-defined parameters, touching on both touching on the E and the S and the G. Social value tends to focus a little bit more on economic growth in local areas. So how do you increase levels of employment, educational attainment? How do you ensure those people who are who are least served or are furthest from the labour force? How you get them closer to accessing sustainable living wage employment? So lots of really lovely opportunities to use private sector investment to social in the way that delivers public goods and public benefits. So that's I guess where I am now. It's very much focused and contributing to a conversation around social value and social change in relation to sustainability and sustainable communities. Just to bring back the academic research, alongside that, I still write and publish more critically on some of these issues. So I think, we shouldn't just accept these definitions as they are at face value. We should constantly be critical of some of these definitions and boundaries we're given as consultants in terms of what is sustainability and how to think about sustainability a bit more critically. So I do contribute to research around those topics. So next slide, just for the last few minutes. So this is very much thinking about, I guess, the story I've just told in terms of how and why I ended up where I ended up in terms of my career. I had a research interest in knowledge and what and how to and to challenge what knowledge is in various kind of contexts and industry contexts, and turn that into a research question. And actually use that focus to pivot into the corporate sector. So actually in my interviews for jobs, I told my story, but I told my story in a way that made sense in the context of the role I was going for. So I explained I had a research interest and this had led me along this path, and actually this is why I turned up to the interview and why I was interested in the job. So actually find your story, think about your area of interest and really turn it into a way of addressing and or responding to particular career opportunity and a job that you might want to go for. Second aspect I want to touch on is build a community, which is there are going to be other people interested in these topics. It's not just going to be you. So actually, who else is talking about these issues? Who else is interested in these areas of research or or commercial topics or areas of interest? Find that community and engage with them, and really, ensure that you're learning to collectively. And third thing I wanted to mention, which is learning from others. I think other people have mentioned this before, but it's a constant exercise of learning. I wouldn't say that I had a particularly planned set of ambitions. I didn't necessarily know where I was going to go when I set off on my career path, but I've learnt and listened and learnt from others constantly. And even in an interview, even if you don't get a job, as a result of the interview, you will learn from that interview. So you will get some information back from the interview where you'll know, okay, now I know where I fit. Okay, so thanks very much. And there are many interviews I had where I realised actually I needed to go in a slightly different direction. And I guess what anthropology teaches you, and this is the final point, is remain reflexive. As I said, I try and contribute to academic research because I think it's important to be critical of some of the work that we do as consultants. Not to say that we can't be consultants, but I think it's really important to be reflexive and reflective on certainly how we act in the world as sustainability practitioners. And final point is for those who are interested in a career in the built environment or just want to speak to others in the built environment who are anthropologists or architects or others who are working in the real estate industry, I've set up a Slack group that's linked to EASA, so it's a link to the European Association of Social Anthropologists, so it's going to be formally ratified by them. But join the Slack group and just there will be a jobs board and an opportunity for freelancing conversations and just dive in and see what you make of it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was all really, really awesome material. And we're going to move back to our last speaker, Andrew. You have the floor.
Thank you, Sarah. And Amy for inviting me here today. I hope you can all hear me. My name is Andrew Giacalone. I'm the Senior Advisor in Media Relations at Fairtrade International. And that photo doesn't do me any justice right now because after a year of basically not having a haircut, I have a much bigger bush on the top of my head. Unfortunately, you won't be able to see that. But I just want to tell a little bit, first of all, about Fairtrade International. Fairtrade is an international organization based in Bonn, Germany, with affiliates around the world, from the United States to across Europe, Latin America, Africa, Asia Pacific. And our core commitment is a social justice commitment. It's to improving living wages and the quality of life for farmers and agricultural workers around the world. And in the UK, the Fairtrade Foundation, which is our local office, does a lot of great work, so you're probably already familiar with Fairtrade. But my journey into sustainability, the SDGs, the green world was not as clear-cut as perhaps. I did not really have sustainability and the SDGs on my radar when I was at St Andrews, when I matriculated there in 1999. I wanted to, I was studying English and philosophy, then I did my master's at film theory, film studies at University College London, and I wanted to be a film critic. Because that's where the money's at, right? In film criticism. So I had some interesting experiences with Sight and Sound magazine, I did some writing, but when the job market opened up and I needed to, of course, make an earning, make a living, I ended up, by chance, working as a producer and stringer for Italian television. I am part Italian, I speak Italian, so that fit was quite natural. And that really kick-started the process that you see in front of you, the journey as I am calling it. Because every task that I encountered, or every job that I did, or every profession that I took up, ended up teaching me something that inevitably led to the next step. Working as a journalist and producer for Sky Italy and for RAI, Italian National Television, and not only took me around the world, interviewing Usain Bolt, Tom Cruise, covering the 2008 elections, won by Barack Obama, so a great historical election. And just as a side note, Sky is a news corporation company, so I got to cover the 2008 elections from Washington, D.C. on the roof of Fox News, so that was fun too. But more than anything, there was a skill set that these professions teach you along the way. And the skill set that I took from the news world was specifically one about inquisitiveness, openness, and mindfulness. Those three prongs, if you will, and of course the job description of being with Raya and Sky inevitably led me to the UN. Well, not inevitably, but it led me to the UN, where I worked for 5 years in their news and media division. Yes, big organizations have divisions, communications departments that, well, depending on the organization, can be very well funded or can be not funded at all. It was very well funded and perhaps a little bloated in terms of communications organization or communications team. But I worked there for about 5 years with the spokesperson, the current spokesperson, Stefan Bucharik, doing media analysis, strategic communications, crisis communications, and then working at the UN News Center, producing written content, digital content for the UN News Center's website, and basically rehashing a lot of the content that was coming out from our offices around the world and making it a little more readable. And this is where I got my first interaction with the Sustainable Development Goals, with the green world, with, of course, not with climate change, but with how organizations in the private sector and public-private partnerships were tackling these challenges. And it was the first interaction with the Agenda 2030, which is, of course, we're on the timeline now for, and within this is the final decade of action, as they're calling it. And the benefits of working in an organization like the UN is straightforward. There is the international environment. There is the multilateralism. There is, of course, the fact that you are getting an education while you're there. There is also the opportunity. If you want to have a UN career, you will get to go places, whether that is in the field, whether that is at another headquarters around the world. I was located in New York City, but there are, of course, headquarters well, here in Bonn, in Geneva, in Nairobi, Bangkok. And it really sets you up for a future in not only in international development, international politics, and peace and security, but it sets you up with that kind of groundwork that then you can spin off into other areas. And that is exactly what I did. I moved on to an organization called Innocence Project, which is a US and New York-based nonprofit that works in criminal justice reform. I wanted, at the time that I was at the UN, to build up my bona fides in human rights. And the Innocence Project was looking for a communications manager. And I went and took over their campaigns and their celebrity outreach, of all things. And I worked at Innocence Project for about 1.5 years, working on a guilty plea project. And now, for those of you who don't know, the Innocence Project was founded in the mid-90s, and with the specific goal of using DNA to prove the innocence of inmates. And it's developed as a quasi-law firm. It has a massive team of lawyers who, of course, take in appeals from or letters of appeal from various inmates, and basically begin their cases and trying to see if they were wronged by the criminal justice system. You would be amazed, or perhaps you wouldn't be amazed, at actually how wrong the criminal justice system, can be, particularly in the United States. And the campaign that I was targeting here, or running, was the Guilty Plea Project. And basically, around over 90% of cases in the US do not go to court. They end up in guilty pleas. Prosecutors who have quite a big advantage over poor defendants. Often these defendants are Black and brown people, men and women. They will either threaten them with extremely heavy sentences or give them a compromise of a lesser sentence if they plead out. And many times these defendants who don't have the resources or they have poor public defenders who are just overworked are given the recommendation to plead out. And so we've encountered many cases of people spending 5, 10, 20 years in prison for crimes that they did not commit. The point of my job was to communicate this, we communicate the gravity of the situation to the general public and to, of course, politicians. And that is intrinsically tied or inextricably tied to the to development, that is fundraising, which a lot of these organizations, like nonprofits like the Innocence Project, like Fairtrade, where I'm at now, require in order to continue to fund their operations. So just to continue, and then I will kind of tie in how communications and careers and sustainability work. I went on from the Innocence Project to the Danish Foreign Ministry, where I worked for 4 years as the head of communications, strategic communications and press at the Consulate General of Denmark in New York. And this is really where I got my hands, I guess, fully immersed in the sustainability agenda, particularly the nation branding element of sustainability. And in this case, I was there to position Denmark as a climate forward, sustainable thinking country, which has, of course, a private sector that is geared towards, a greener future. So, working with the Danish government, and not only did I do a lot of public affairs work as part of my communications, that is engaging with local governments and private sector. But also, speech writing as a communications person for the Prime Minister, Foreign Minister, and also my principal at the time, who was the ambassador as well. But also consulting with Danish companies who would come and say, listen, this is, if it's Ørsted, which is considered the most sustainable company in the world, produces wind turbines, Danish company. Say we want to work together, let's craft an event, let's do a partnership in which we can communicate Denmark's, in this case, of course, would be primacy in the sector, and elevate not only Ørsted, but of course Denmark's brand as a nation at the same time. That then converted after 4 years to my current role at Fairtrade, where, as I said, we work in boosting the quality of life for farmers and agricultural workers around the world, but we're also strongly involved in gender equality and climate change. Actually, as regards gender equality, if you go into BBC4's Women's Hour, just on Monday, our global CEO spoke about the intersection of gender equality and cacao production. So that might be something for you guys to look at after this talk. But how does communications and sustainability all kind of wrap up together? I believe Douglas mentioned it before. Every organization, nonprofit, global organization, international, non-governmental organization or whatnot, needs someone to communicate what they're doing. And when it comes to sustainability, when it comes to the Sustainable Development Goals, which, by the way, are kind of a broad swath of goals. They're multicolored, not just green. It's, gender equality and, clean urban solutions and clean energy, rather renewables. They're all kind of lumped into the SDGs. When you need to communicate them, you need to, a communicator needs to take the kind of dense 300-page policy document that has been worked on by, extremely bright legal minds and people who know, PhDs, people who know a lot about this, and boil it down into something that is communicable, that is compelling, and that really, really can grab the public's attention and your audiences. When you're fundraising, you need to grab the donor's attention. When you are communicating to politicians, legislation, you need to grab their attention, whether that's at the EU level or at the member state level at the UN, or in your local government. So communication is a critical facet of sustainability world, just because without the communicators making the links between the general public, the various audiences that are out there, and those who are doing the nitty-gritty, granular data crunching work, you really risk not coming to completion when we speak about, say, Agenda 2030 coming to completion, because frankly, it is, the general public, the people who make things happen when they go vote, the people who donate money, they're the ones who really need to be the drivers of change at the end of the day. And the communicators are the ones who can help make that happen. So moving on, this panel event came at an interesting time. About 2 years ago in 2019, that was 20 years since I matriculated at St Andrews. And I had an opportunity to just kind of think over the summer, wow, 20 years ago, I would be getting ready to go to St Andrews. What would I have done different? What would I have liked to have in terms of someone sitting down and, talking to me? And I think a couple of these 3 points that I say, I think overlap with what has been already addressed. First of all, and they actually overlap each other. I'll start with the last one first. Do not give in to pressure. Yeah, don't be too hard on yourselves. And you're all extremely smart, individuals. I mean, you would not be at St Andrews if you weren't. But that doesn't mean that you can't use your 20s for exploring, for trying new jobs, new opportunities, even those opportunities which don't immediately fit into your idea of who you are or where you want to be or plan to be. I mean, I started just after I graduated. I found myself working on a political campaign in New York City. I was working at a candy store at one point as well. Learn the different skill sets, and above all, make friends. Build your networks during this process. Your networks nowadays, as we're doing all these things virtually, don't have to be in person. One thing that we use a lot from the communication side is, for example, Twitter. Build a profile, build your brand, communicate to people who you find interesting on virtual platforms, dialogue with them, learn from them. Build your networks. I think someone previously mentioned LinkedIn. Use LinkedIn, use Twitter, use TikTok if that's where you find yourself most expressing yourself. You build a brand for yourself and a name for yourself in that way, and also contacts as well. Just to wrap up, I would like to add one more piece of advice there that I think, now 20 years on from St Andrews, 22 years on from St Andrews, but with 2 kids, I would like to throw your way. That is, acquire skills, as many as you can and as fast as you can. And those skills can be anything. That can be, particularly from a communicator standpoint, that could be, learning how to edit with, Final Cut or doing Adobe Photoshop. That can be or taking photographs. It can be, learning how to write more succinctly or speak more succinctly. Or even, it can be a skill that has nothing to do with communication, but something that satisfies another part of your being. I don't know, cocktail making, for example, behind a bar, which actually has a lot more to do with communication than you would initially imagine. So build those skills now, because there will come a time in your future in which you won't have time to build them. So I think I will conclude there with the final that final piece of advice. But just remember, communication is key. And coming from a background, as I said, I came from an English and philosophy background and a film studies background. All elements of those studies really fed in to how we view the world, how we help others express the way they view the world, and how we help audiences view the world as well. So thank you.
Thank you so much for everyone's experiences and advice. And I'll just stop presenting. And we could head into the Q&A, which I think Ben will lead.
So hi everyone. I think we're slated to end at around 6 p.m., but I think we'll have time for 1 or 2 questions. So if there's like anybody who would like to ask a question, please ask in the chat or raise your hand and let us know. But I think like on our end, we would just like to start from more general, like a more general question. Thank you to all the speakers for the presentations. It was very interesting and fascinating to hear about all of your experiences. What we would like to ask is what do you enjoy the most about your job? Is you guys have gone through a lot of like different things about your job and like more details, but what do you enjoy the most about your job?
I can go first. I think intrinsically we're all probably people, and for me it's really about, from the community side, connecting with the communities and really being able to communicate their language to the government or private sector's language. So being able to be the bridge there. But I quite like, I like that aha moment. I like when I'm able to provide the aha moment for companies and the government, when it's like, oh, the penny's finally dropped. We do have to engage communities and not tell them what we're doing, but really come together in this dialectic way of communicating. I'm using communicating because of Andrew now, and maybe I need to learn some lessons on being succinct, Andrew. That might be the next lesson.
Oh, you know, that's a lesson I could use too.
I can follow up on that just quick.
Uh-oh. All right, well, I guess I'll jump in there. Then we seem to have lost Gemma for a second. Yeah, I agree with Stacy. It's really, I like working, well, I think people are the focus, but also working at the intersection of different disciplines from translating. I think, you know, I would just say that sort of the motto that I think in the sustainability world that I don't think I invented it, but I think it sums it up, is leave nothing out and leave no one behind. So you get to get all the different factors that you want to put in, and also all the different groups that are affected, and try to synthesize those into a new whole.
Yeah, I think. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Would you like to go ahead?
No, go ahead.
I think I can second what was said before. For me, it's also learning. I'm extremely driven by learning new things. One of the reasons why I went into anthropology was because I felt I had so many interests, and anthropology opened a door towards pursuing so many different, you know, meeting so many different people and pursuing different interests of mine. So just that experience of doing research and going out there and meeting people across the world, now via video calls, but never mind that. That's really important to me. And Stacy was mentioning those aha moments, and I think that is extremely rewarding in any job that you're doing, when you come to a point where you learn something new and you go, wow, I get it. I have a completely different way of looking at this. I think that's extremely motivating.
You know, I from my side, not being an expert in the sense that I think some of you are, with I actually really enjoy the learning process. As a communicator, you have to dive in, you know, in policy papers, you have to figure out exactly, it's like a little bit of a riddle, figure out, you know, what's the best way that you can get a message across, and not have the person that you're talking to have their eyes glaze over at the same time. And, you know, one of the best ways to look at it is actually look around you and see how much bad communication there is from you know, major organizations that are working in this space. I'm not trying to say that my communication is any better, but perhaps I'm one of those. But you know, you can definitely see that link between your average person on the street and an organization that is working proactively with purpose for a goal that benefits all is extremely important. And you know, charting my trajectory, I just wanted to say that this is something that is certainly within your reach. education that you have. And for that, I'm speaking to all of you attending.
Could I just add that I think, Andrew, that's a really important point, that sense of purpose and that sense of meaning. And I think that's what connects careers in sustainability, because it gives you a sense of meaning beyond just your career. And there are days where even if you really love your job, there are days where you will be stressed and you'll be worried and you will not like it. But I think that overall meaning that you can take from it, that's what keeps driving you. And just to repeat, in terms of learning, I also think it's, and maybe that connects all of our careers, it's that communication and that interaction and facilitating dialogue between different people. That's what's so important, especially in an era of anthropogenic climate change and in an era of global interconnected problems. We need to find ways of communicating with each other, and learning is part of that, and getting people to come together and talk, even if you don't agree. That's also really important. So I think that's central when you think about a career in sustainability.
Okay, we're running a bit over time, but if everyone's okay, we'll just answer like one question from the chat. Lauren says they want to work for an environmental NGO, like in New York or DC, like NRDC or Fairtrade. This question is specifically directed at Doug and Andrew, but also for like the others as well. Do you have any advice on how students can get a job or internship with one of like your organizations or like similar nonprofit organizations within the sector?
Andrew, you want to go first? Uh-oh. Okay, he's frozen too. All right. Yeah, I think when we have internships become available for the summer and some during the year, and we post them on our website. We have an inclusive recruitment process, and so we one thing that you'd say about sort of internal equity and fairness is that in the past, even at our, probably, I'm not sure about Andrew's organization, but my organization, internships were given out sort of like if you knew somebody, you got an internship, and it wasn't very transparent. So now we have a process in place where we recruit, but we also try to really make sure that we're 100% transparent and fair about who gets an opportunity. So there are a bunch of internships available. I would just regularly check our website for postings. That's the best way. Yeah, that's what I can. I think getting a job at an environmental NGO can be challenging, actually, because it's actually a lot of people want to do it right now. So I think going straight out of school isn't probably the easiest way. So I think getting an internship while you're in school and doing something else and trying to come back, at least in my organization, is the best way to probably do it.
Yeah, I hope you can hear me. Yeah, I would echo exactly what Douglas said. Fairtrade right now, our internships are frozen here, at least in Bonn, but hopefully they will, due to the pandemic, hopefully they'll open up soon enough. There are Fairtrade organizations, as I mentioned, around the world, Fairtrade America or Fairtrade Foundation in the UK on their own. If you're interested in an organization, I wrote in the chat at the UN, they also have a pretty kind of bureaucratic hiring process in order to avoid the kind of non-transparent process that used to occur that I think Douglas also mentioned. If you have a specific question regarding my sector or anything that I've done in the past, please, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. One thing that I didn't mention before, honestly, is don't be afraid to reach out to people. If they don't answer back or they just are rude or whatever, that's the way it is, and you move on. But feel free to contact me. If I can help you, I will. If I can give you some advice, I will. If I can't help you, I'll tell you I'm sorry, I can't help you. But yeah, find me on LinkedIn, and if you are on LinkedIn, and send me connect, and then we can talk like that too.
Could I just add that quite a lot of the industry or environmental associations, maybe not internships, but you could have there are volunteer opportunities. Look at maybe other sectors that will lend towards the environmental sector. So, for example, a lot of environmental agencies are really looking to beef up their climate change or even their financial literacy within like climate finance and even within green bonds. So maybe think a little bit outside of the box. Don't look specifically at the solely environmental industries, and kind of try and build your experiences around what the environmental sector will need in order to answer some of the future sustainability issues.
Okay.
That's great advice. Sorry, I just wanted to say that I think that's great. I mean, all of our backgrounds illustrate that point. I mean, none of us really were environmental science people, and we all ended up doing sustainability. So I would just, and looking forward, I think the social aspects will be more and more important. So anyway, I think you could do a lot of ways to get there if you have your eye on the prize.
Thank you all so much for your answers. I think this is all we have time for, unfortunately. I will pass it back to Sarah to give some closing remarks and end the event.
Yeah, just to echo Ben, thank you so much. I think it was really useful advice for all of us. And if you are all okay with it, because the Q&A was a bit shorter, maybe if anyone has any further questions, we could just shoot in an email maybe at the end of next week, so we could just all group it together. But yeah, I just want to thank you so much for spending so much time with this. And it makes us very inspired for the future.
Thanks, Sarah and team. Really wonderful job.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.